the radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday afternoon. We have already got a lively chat going. I hope all of you are doing well and having a great weekend. As I was saying in the chat, I'm a little tired today. I think I overdid it in my workout. I don't do HIIT, high intensity, so my workouts are too long and too much repetition. So Ashton is in Zimbabwe. So also I discovered that Ashton Milky Way, who's been asking a lot of questions on the Super Chat lately, is from Zimbabwe, which is, wow, that's pretty amazing. I visited what was Rhodesia when I visited, in, I think it was 1969 when I was a kid. I visited Victoria Falls and had family in Rhodesia in those days. So I've actually been to Zimbabwe, as amazing and ridiculous as that is. But before it was Zimbabwe, when it was Rhodesia. All right, Ashton. Yeah, Zimbabwe is not an easy place to live. Not an easy place to live. All right, today we are going to be talking about wealth, what it is, where it comes from. Is it all about natural resources? Did we steal it all? All of that stuff, all that fun stuff. So if you got questions about wealth, go for it. We're going to be talking about wealth. And then I also owe some movie reviews. I owe quite a few, actually. And I promise I will get to all of them. But today I'm going to review The County, which is an Icelandic movie. And I think it was recommended and paid for, the review, by one of our Norwegian supporters. I don't know if he's here, but hopefully he'll see this and he'll be able to enjoy the review of The County. We'll get to that towards the end of the show once we've talked about wealth. Let's see. Before we get to the Jonathan. Hey, thanks, Jonathan. Really appreciate the support. Thanks for being here. Before we get to a discussion of wealth, I wanted to do a quick update. Hey, Jennifer's been to Iceland. I've been to Iceland too. It's really cold in Iceland. It's beautiful, but it's really cold. It's one of the things I remember. Before I even get to the update, don't forget Super Chat. Super Chat is the way to ask me questions. Super Chat, more importantly, is the way to support the show. Super Chat questions from $1 to $1,000 or whatever the software allows you to do are available. The more dollar you put on the Super Chat question, the sooner I ask the question. And I will get to them, but I won't get to the questions until I cover at least some material. But feel free to ask the questions. I copy them over. I keep track of them. And of course, the more and the sooner you ask the question, the more likely it is for me to answer it today. What else about Super Chat? Yeah, last month, December, was a record month. It was the best month ever in terms of Super Chat. We have an opportunity to make it this month the third best ever. We could make it the best ever, but that would require some really, today and tomorrow shows to be out of this world. But we could easily make this month the third best ever. So what we need to do that is to get to our New World targets, to get to 600. I think 750 would make it easy. If we made it up closer to 1,000, we would get close to challenging kind of our all-time records here, and that would be terrific. So don't forget, use the Super Chat to support the Yaron Brook Show, to support what we do, lectures, panels, debates, of course, the Yaron Brook shows, 4 week, hours and hours and hours and hours of content. So, and all promoting the ideas of egoism, of individual rights, of capitalism, freedom, and liberty. And of course, all of that grounded on reason. All right, let's jump in with what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to start out with. All right, before we do that, God, you guys won't let me start. Ashton says, yeah, my family and I currently live in Bindura, Zimbabwe. I have no idea where Bindura, Zimbabwe is. And yeah, it's not the easiest place to live. No, it's not. Lots of poverty, yes, and government regulations, yes, to restrict economic growth. Most likely going to live in the US very soon. Excellent. I still have my I think Jonathan Honey gave them to me. I think I got them from another source as well, but Jonathan Honey gave me a stack of 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar notes. 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar notes. They're worth exactly zero today, because the Zimbabwe dollar is gone. But that's the kind of economic conditions, economic environment, unfortunately, that has plagued Zimbabwe. Plagued is the wrong term. Is being self-inflicted on Zimbabwe by its leadership over the period. So Zimbabwe, a beautiful place, amazing. Victoria Falls are amazing. Safaris are amazing. But a very difficult place to live in terms of economically. Brutal economic policies. Brutal conditions. All right, let's. I wanted to give you all an update on Ukraine. We talked about Ukraine. I've done a couple of shows in Ukraine. They were quite popular. A lot of people watched them. There's a lot of desire for more information about Ukraine. Nothing much is new other than Biden is flexing even more muscles and pounding the drums even more for aggressive actions against Russia. Again, I think this is serves his purposes of showing he's a tough guy and diverting attention from political problems he's facing, his failed presidency, and economic struggles we have. Putin is really in the commanding seat here. He can do what he wants. He can invade Ukraine, and nobody's going to do much about it except some sanctions. That would hurt you. That would hurt Russia economically. So I don't think Putin is particularly eager to do anything other than to make a lot of noise and to show off and to get people excited and so on. I don't think he wants economic sanctions that will come with war or with him being overly aggressive. On the other hand, this is an opportunity for him to flex real muscles. I saw somewhere, I read somewhere that Russian intelligence, Russian think tanks, the Russian people to some extent believe that the Russian military could take Europe if it wanted. It could defeat the forces of NATO in Europe if it wanted. Russians are always overconfident when it comes to military capabilities, but my experience, I don't have a huge amount of experience, but my experience with Russian weapons system, actually I do have a fair amount of experience, it's just old, is that they overpromise and underdeliver. That is that Russian weapons are usually pretty mediocre, and that Western weapon systems can crush them pretty easily. Now, I don't think Ukraine necessarily can do that, but I do think NATO would defeat the Russians, even though the Russians probably have more tanks, more planes, more numbers. The quality of the weaponry, the quality of the training, the quality of the forces that the Europeans and particularly the Americans have is far better than anything the Russians could deploy into the field, and therefore I don't think the Russians have a chance if they really wanted to go to war. I don't think they do. I just don't think they're that reckless. I don't think they're that stupid. But you never know, of course, with political leaders. Political leaders can be super reckless and can be super stupid. I just watched the movie Munich something. Like, it's on Netflix. It's a best-selling movie right now on Netflix. It's about the Munich Agreement, Chamberlain's agreement with Hitler. Sadly, I think the movie, while suspenseful and well done and well acted, but is an attempt to whitewash and to justify Neville Chamberlain. It's an attempt to justify his compromise with evil, to justify his willing to basically give in to Hitler and give Hitler everything that he wanted, all in the name, according to the movie, in the name of buying time. But of course, I believe that it did exactly the opposite. It emboldened Hitler. It made Hitler stronger. It made Hitler much more confident in his ability to destroy Europe, and that the Allies were weak. And it's just a shameful, disgusting, moral betrayal of a free people. Again, Europe cares about what happens. European countries should care about what happens in Europe. I don't think America should care as much, but Europeans should. And the British and the French's capitulation is disgusting and awful. And they paid for it with real brutality of World War II. How did I get there? Anyway, that's connection to Ukraine. Yeah, I mean, cutting peace with dictators, appeasing strongman does not help. And of course, what happened in the end to Hitler is he overreached. What will happen to Putin is he'll overreach. And so it's hard to, while I say I don't think Putin is going to actually invade Ukraine. I don't think the Russians will do it. I think they're smarter than that. Well, Chamberlain was not smart enough to stand up to Hitler. Hitler was not smart enough to not invade France and Poland, and then not open a second front with the Soviets. So authoritarian thugs cannot be counted on to act smartly. There's a huge issue in foreign policy where they assume state actors are rational, like the Putin is a rational individual. Now, that empties the concept of rationality completely, right? It assumes, but it says, this is the way to think about it. Putin has goals, and he's going to rationally attain those goals. But state actors are rarely rational. They really rarely have articulated goals. They are creatures of whim. They are creatures of irrationality. They are creatures of self-destruction. Yeah, the movie's called Munich, the Edge of War. It was quite well done, but it is a kind of a whitewashing of Chamberlain, which is unfortunate. But it does kind of show you what happened there, at least a fictionalized version of what happened there. I think the whole situation created in the movie is fictionalized, but the essence, the framework is all true. Anyway, where was I going with this? Ukraine. We were talking about Ukraine. Who knows what Putin is going to do? Here is the fear I think that we all should feel a little bit of. Here's the worry I have. And it's a worry that I don't think the powers to be are really preparing for. And I don't trust the U.S. government for being ready to cope with and to handle it. But it's something that all of us could feel if war comes and Russia thinks it's cornered. And that is, while Russia cannot take the United States on, it cannot take Europe on militarily, and therefore I think it will limit itself to Ukraine, and I don't think it will engage in military activities with NATO, and there won't be a war between the United States and Russia. What Russia has learned is that the United States does not view cyber attacks against it as acts of war, which is a mistake, because they are acts of war. I'll say that again. What Russia has learned, China has learned this as well, is the United States does not view cyber attacks against the United States, against assets, against property in the United States, as an act of war, even though I think they are. And as a consequence of that, I think there's a real danger that in response to economic sanctions, that the West and the United States will inflict on Russia if it invades or if it does anything aggressive, that Russia engaged in significant cyber attacks on the United States, on our cyber infrastructure, on our internet infrastructure, which I think is quite vulnerable, which I don't think is protected. And as a consequence of that, we, Americans, and maybe Westerners generally, in Western Europe as well, could suffer significantly from, imagine if the internet goes down, or imagine if certain services on the internet go down for long periods of time. These are real problems that I do not think that we are completely prepared for, or that we have the defensive capabilities to deal with. And that, you know, that's a failure of our leadership. That wouldn't surprise anybody, right? That the last 4 or 5 presidents have failed to prepare us for cyber war, and the fact that our weakness and our inability to respond when they attack us or when they hack us has just emboldened them even further. So I'm worried about the internet infrastructure. I've read some stuff where the Russian Navy is actually positioning itself off the coast of Ireland. And you might ask yourself, why is the Russian Navy off the coast of Ireland? And it turns out that the cables that connect, the internet cables, fiber cables that connect the United States to Western Europe, or at least to the British Isles, but I think to all of Western Europe, run off the western coast of Ireland. And you know, what could be a greater threat than for the Russians to threaten those cables? I don't know if proximity to those cables allows for greater hacking. I just don't know enough about the technical aspects of it. But imagine if they you know, threaten those cables physically or through hacking. That would put us in danger, and that would be a real threat to us. And this is why, you know, political leadership is so important. Having the right people in power is so important. Having political leaders who actually care about protecting the United States and protecting the individual rights and the safety of Americans is so important. And why, you know, it's so tragic and sad that we really haven't had such a president probably since Reagan, but certainly don't have a president right now. I just don't think the guy in power, you know, I just don't think Biden is aware enough, is together enough, and has surrounded himself with quality people enough to do this. I don't think Trump could have dealt with this. Very questionable if Obama could. You know, very questionable if Bush could. So, you know, it's troubling. And what I think the authoritarians in the world are learning for the first time since the fall of the Berlin Wall, I think the authoritarians in the world, the Russians and the Chinese, are kind of flexing their muscles. China took Hong Kong from under our noses last year. Is how weak we really are, how vulnerable we really are. And, you know, China, by the way, China took Hong Kong from under our noses while Trump was president. So so the Chinese were quite willing to risk it, and they took it. They just took Hong Kong completely, because it was clear to them Trump didn't care, and I don't think Trump would have cared about Ukraine. He would have asked the Russians, Trump would have said to the Russians, when you reach Kiev, get me that evidence about Hunter Biden. I don't think Trump would have cared one iota about Russian aggression in Ukraine. Yeah, Trump loves Putin and was best friends with him, and if anything, cowered before him. So this is why political leadership matters, because our lives are threatened by bad guys in the world. Threatened by bad guys who, you know, who defraud us and steal our stuff, so we need, or burn our property, or riot in the streets. So we need the policing powers, but threatened by bad guys on a large scale, by authoritarians all over the world who can do real damage to the United States, even if they don't go to war against us. Of course, if Russia did that to the US, that would be an act of war. What then? How do we respond then? How do we respond then? All right. Let's see. Just on this quickly. I'm glad, this is from Robert. and I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name because I forgot already the way I'm supposed to pronounce it, and I'll just revert to the wrong way of pronouncing your name, which is bad, I know, so I'd rather not try. So Robert asks, I'm glad Trump lost, and we got a useless president, but the downside of a useless president is sometimes you need a president to be useful. In this case, to take a moral stand. Last president who could speak that language, Bush. I mean, Bush spoke a moral stand, but didn't act in any kind of moral stand, and his moral speech was always undermined. You know, the axis of evil, Islam is a religion of peace. In the same, I think in the same talk. So Bush was a man filled with contradiction. He had that religious, evangelical, moral speak. But he also had the turn the other cheek and he loved the enemy and all the other garbage that comes with Christianity. So he was inconsistent at best. The last one who spoke consistently, didn't always act, but spoke consistently was Reagan. But Reagan didn't act consistently. You know, and Clinton could sometimes speak morally about foreign policy. But again, no action. No action. But I don't think Obama, I don't think Trump, and I don't think Biden have the capacity to actually articulate why Putin is a thug, why Ukraine is a free country, and invading a free country is morally wrong. Morally, politically, every respect wrong. And why, even though it's morally wrong, even though it's evil, what Putin is going to do if he invades, just as threatening is evil and wrong, we, the United States, are not going to get involved militarily. Now, I would be selling the Ukrainians every weapon they want, you know, maybe short of nukes. Every weapon they want so they can defend themselves. And I'm glad to see Canada of all countries. Canada has troops in Ukraine training the Ukrainians on how to defend themselves against the Russians. The Canadians, the pacifist Canadians, are out there, and they've actually increased their troops just recently, the number of Canadian troops in Ukraine training the Ukrainians. So, you know, I think if the Russians invade the Ukrainians, we'll put up a fight. I hope so. I believe so. You know, we'll see. It's always difficult to tell, not being on the ground, what the actual motivation of people is. But I think they'll put up a fight, and they could put up a pretty brutal fight. And this is what, and they've got anti-tank weapons, which again, Russian tanks are overrated. Russian planes are overrated. Now, the thing that is really problematic for the Ukrainians is that the Russians have air superiority, unquestionably. The Ukrainian airplanes are old. I think the Russian airplanes from a long, long time ago, they have not upgraded the Air Force. But hopefully they have some air defense systems. Hopefully the United States has sold them state-of-the-art air defense systems and electronic jamming equipment that'll help prevent the damage that air superiority can bring. Anyway, just wanted to give you that update. You know, I'm monitoring the situation, keeping in touch with it, doing some seminars online when there are people who are interesting that are talking about Ukraine, so I can bring you the latest from what's going on there. You know, I'm hoping that that no war is engaged. I'm hoping that Ukraine can stay an independent country and that we don't see bloodshed in Ukraine. But it's hard to tell. Every morning I look at the news expecting an announcement of some kind of invasion or incursion or something. I don't think the Russians are actually going to try to go to Kiev. I think they might take just the eastern provinces. But let's hope they don't do anything. Robert says Russian tanks are coffins, it seems. If you want to ask me about Russian tanks, I'm happy to tell you Russian tank stories. Given that I was in the tank corps facing Russian tanks, I can tell you some stories. Ashton, Milky Way, this conflict between Russia and Ukraine just sounds like a collectivism at work. Yeah, but there are good guys and bad guys here, so don't make a moral equivalency here. The bad guys are the Russians. The Russians, it's pure collectivism. And the Ukrainians are, you know, just trying to, the Ukrainians have no hostile ambitions towards Russia. To the extent that Ukraine is interested in NATO, they're interested in NATO to protect it from Russia. So there are bad guys and there are good guys here, even if the good guys are not perfect, right? See, Ukraine, here are the good guys. And Russia is collectivist. Russia is interested in having its sphere of influence, having control over other countries like it has in Belarus and Kazakhstan and Central Asia and parts of Europe. It would like to extend that. It would like to push NATO back out of Poland, out of Czech Republic, and certainly out of the Baltic countries. And you know, I think Putin is bobbing and weaving to try to figure that out. So it's not that both sides are quite as collectivistic. Russia is the primary collectivistic. Jennifer says Russian tank story. I think I've told this story, though. I just remembered that I think I told this story. But when I was in the tank corps, we were really trained. We trained against the Russian T-72. The T-72 at the time was considered the most advanced tank in the world. It had a very slick profile, so it was very difficult to actually hit it. And it was relatively fast, and it had what no Western tank had. It had an automatic loading system of the projectiles that a tank fires. So in a typical tank, you have 4 members. You have a driver, you have a loader, you have a gunner who shoots, and you have a tank commander. I was a gunner and actually, hurt my back in tank commander school, and then I got shifted to military intelligence. But so we were basically training against T-72, the T-72s, and we were told that they had the best tanks, and unfortunately, I was in the most primitive tanks the Israelis had. The Israelis had these old Centurion tanks, which were British tanks from the 1950s and 60s, and some of the units in the Israeli tank corps had the M60s, I think it was, the new American tank that had just been brought into service in the late 70s, and the new Israeli tank, which turned out to be probably the best tank in the world, at least at the time, which was the Merkava, which was a very, very advanced tank, and very, very focused on protecting the soldiers in the tank. My tank was like a coffin. If it got hit, you were dead. I mean, there was just no way out of it. And you probably died a very, very slow, painful death of being roasted alive in the tank. So it was brutal. That's the Centurion tanks. Anyway, so we trained against the Russian tanks, and of course, we were always told, we were scared of the Russian tanks, and it was always a worry, and it was always a fear. And then the Israeli tank corps actually engaged with the Russians, with the Russian tanks that the Syrians had in 1982 in the war in Lebanon. Now, by that point, I was in military intelligence. I was not in the tank corps, luckily, and so I didn't see combat in that sense. But I was, part of my role in intelligence was to monitor what was going on, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. But so one of the things that we noticed was that that one of the things that happens to the automatic loading system. Now, the automatic loading system has a lot of advantages because you can staff the tank with only 3 people. You have less human error and all of that stuff. But what it turns out is that with the T-72, you didn't actually have to hit the tank. You could hit anywhere close to the tank, and the explosion would rattle the tank, and basically the rattling of the tank would make the automatic loader go, basically would disable it, and it would stop working. So you didn't even have to hit the tank to disable the tank. Now, without the automatic loader, given that they only had 3 people, there's no way to load a projectile into into the tank, and the tank became useless, and the crew just would get out and run. So the tank would suffer a concussion, and it would be completely disabled. And one of the things I vaguely remember during that war was the Americans and the Israelis wanted to get their hands on a T-72. They wanted to, because you wanted to get one so that you could actually train against it. This is one of the great advantages the U.S. military had, is it had Israel collecting, as it won wars, collecting Soviet equipment so that then the Americans could train against that equipment. They would study it, they would learn it, they would get every aspect of it, and then they would, this is what we did. So one of the missions during the war in Lebanon was to get one of these abandoned tanks and to bring it back to Israel, which the Israeli military did. And then they had a T-72 that they could target practice against and could learn its weaknesses and could learn its strengths and could learn exactly how to defeat it. And Israel did this with weapon system after weapon system after weapon system in the Soviet era, and I assume, that continues in the Russian era. There's a lot of knowledge that we have about all of this. Wow, Roland says he's in the Pyrenees in Catalonia. Catalonia is not a country, Roland. That's in Spain, right? Wow, that's beautiful country. I love Spain. It's a great place. The Pyrenees are beautiful. Catalonia is beautiful. The food is amazing. All right, that's my Russian tank story. All right. Are we done with tanks, Ukraine, and Russia for a little while? By the way, if you want to ask me a question about Russia, how I would govern it, anything like that, post in the super chat. Happy to answer any one of those questions. It doesn't cost more than, some people ask questions for $5, $2. Certainly for the price of a cappuccino, you can ask a question on the super chat and I will answer it. No, I'm not part of the Free Catalonia movement. Maybe Roland is, but I'm not. All right. Thanks, Roland. Thanks for the support. Let's see. Yeah. We're going to keep all those questions for later. Wealth does not come from Russian tanks. Wealth is indeed destroyed by Russian tanks. That's the purpose of Russian tanks, is to destroy wealth. Tanks generally, the whole purpose of tanks, the whole purpose of the machinery of war is destruction. And what do they destroy? They destroy wealth. Because what is wealth? What is wealth? Right? So wealth is the material goods made by man. It's the material stuff that we have. That is our wealth. It's your home, it's your furniture, it's all the stuff that you have. It's, for many of our billionaires, it is the productive capacity of their companies. It's the productive capacity of their businesses. Wealth is the material goods. When wealth increases, what that means is then our material well-being is increased. We're better off from a material perspective. We have more stuff. We have better stuff. Wealth is not money. Money is a form of wealth in its capacity to purchase stuff. So your wealth is not the amount of money you have, but what that money can buy. So the purchasing power of the money. So the purchasing power of money. So wealth is all the stuff that we have out there that is made by us, by man, for man, for us to live in, for us to enjoy, for us to benefit from, and for us, most importantly, to be able to produce, from. Right. Now, why did I pick this topic? Because you might have seen that we're putting out, or Action Jackson is putting out, 1-minute videos of me saying smart stuff. I mean, he could just take any show and turn it into, 90 to 100 of these videos. But he is picking the particularly smart stuff that I say, the particularly confrontational stuff that I say. And usually the best of these 1-minute videos is when you can get a question and my, at least beginning of an answer to it out there. And one of these that was put out on January 3rd, you can find it on YouTube, is called Woke Student Gets Free Education on Capitalism. And we put out quite a few of those. We're going to put out quite a few more. They're doing very well. A lot of people watch them. And I think as a consequence of a lot of people watching them, we're actually seeing a nice, steady increase in subscribers to this show. So these 1-minute videos that you would think are worthless, that are being put, I think, on YouTube, but also put on TikTok and maybe on Instagram. I don't know what Action Jackson does, but my assumption is they go up on Instagram, maybe on Facebook, maybe in other places, are driving people to our main YouTube channel, and more people are subscribing to the channel, which is great. And it's just 1 minute. That's a TikTok minute. And no cats. No cats and no puppies, right? And Woke Student Gets Free Education on Capitalism is already at 56,000 views. 56,000 views in 3 weeks. That's pretty good. It's not, it's not Lex Friedman numbers. Although my video with Lex Friedman and Yoram Chazoni is now at 330,000. So I guess 3.5 hours interviews on Lex Friedman do better than 1 minute shorts do. But how you can't go on Lex Friedman all the time. Lex wouldn't have it, and people would get bored. But Lex would lose his 1.4 million subscribers. But this is great. 56,000 people in 3 weeks. It's not a record, but it's close to a record in terms of video views. And this could grow a lot because it's not going away. Every day we're getting I don't know, more and more and more. In the last few days we probably had around 10,000 views of this video. So it's increasing. We could very well get into the millions ultimately. Particularly, I don't know what it's doing. Maybe Action Jackson can fill us in. How it's doing on TikTok, how it's doing on other platforms. This is just YouTube. Anyways, this is up there. And one of the things, the question says about wealth and so on. And I say capitalism, 19th century, industrial revolution, increases in wealth. And then you get in the comments section, you get all this stuff in the comments section, right? Oh, I highlighted this. Now I can't find it. Yeah, there it is. In the comments section is filled with this kind of stuff. Wealth was stolen from resource-rich nations. Resources, slaves, land, water, all stolen. Right? And now I ignore that, but it keeps getting repeated. Somebody else says, well, he forgot to add it was because of exploited resources of Asian and African countries that the European nation built wealth. Right? And I thought, God, this is a confusion that people have, and that they still have in the 21st century, and that it still kind of dominates people's thinking. The idea that wealth equals natural resources, and that wealth comes from natural resources. And I thought, well, we should do a show on where wealth actually comes from. And are natural resources wealth? Now, take natural resources. This stuff in the ground. Oil, I don't know, metals, all kinds of stuff that's in the ground. Land. is it a natural resource? Oh, well, is it a resource first? And then is it wealth? Well, if I don't know what to do with the stuff, then it's just stuff. It's not wealth. What do we say? Right? Wealth is material goods made by man. Well, it's not a good because I don't know what to do with it. It's not made by human beings. It's just a waste. And indeed, until the mid-19th century, oil in the ground was not considered a good. It was considered an evil. It made farming on the land impossible. It leaked out, this black geek that dirtied everything. It was difficult to get rid of. Nobody wanted it. Resources that were underground were not known, and therefore were not a good for man. They were just nothing. They were non-existent. They didn't exist. Africa has had no natural resources before they were discovered. But more importantly, before a use for them was created. What made nature a resource is man's ability to take that and use it for something. Oil for energy, plastics, materials, gas coming out of the ground for energy, metals for construction of things. I mean, today they talk about rare earth metals. It was, they just were there in China lying around. It was not a resource. They were not valuable. They had no value. They were just stuff, and they were not wealth. So it's not the case that Africa and Asia and China and whatever had just these stores of wealth in the land that were stolen from them. They had stuff in the ground. And it's people who discovered that that stuff could be used for productive means, that that stuff could be made into wealth, could be harvested as wealth, could be mined as wealth. But that required discovery. That required action. That required ingenuity. That required innovation. And then they had to figure out how to get it, how to extract it. Now, I'm not saying what European colonizers did in Africa and in Asia was okay and they did it right, because to a large extent they often did not respect the people who lived there. They often were brutal. They often killed a lot of people. So there was a massive violation of the rights of individuals in these countries, they weren't countries, in these locations, in the attempt to access the natural resources. Even today, the mining operations in the Congo are not just, they're not right, they're not good. Whose fault is that is an open question, right? Primarily the local people there who don't respect property rights. The local governments there who don't respect property rights. But nature is only a resource when human beings alter it, when human beings use it. It's not wealth until we discover how to make it wealth, how to make it productive, how to make it useful, how to make it something that is useful for human beings. Land. When we were hunter-gatherers, land was not a resource. Land was unimportant. Yeah, it was good for the grazing, the bisons of grazing, so we could hunt the bison, but the land was not a resource until we become farmers. Only when we become farmers does land become a resource. And then it becomes wealth, a source of wealth. because you can grow stuff on it. It's productive now. And now, it is a material good that is made for man, agriculture. Now, so you can't, natural resources, sure, are valuable to those who know how to use them. The fact is, gold was not valuable to the Incas because they didn't use it for anything. Yes, they did a little bit of jewelry, but it wasn't useful because there was no productive activity that it could facilitate. But for the Spaniards and the Portuguese who mined it and brought it to Europe, it solidified it as the monetary unit. It then became the monetary unit that was used for what? Was used to facilitate production. Funnily enough, not in Portugal and Spain, and that's why it's interesting, right? The natural resources, you'd think that Portugal and Spain today would be the richest countries in the world because they found all the gold and they brought all the gold and they stole, in quotes, all the gold, and they should be the richest. And yet Portugal and Spain became impoverished, relatively speaking. They did not become the wealthiest. Why? Because they didn't take that gold and they didn't invest it in production. They consumed it all. And once it ran out in terms of the new supply and constant mining, they had nothing. And where did all that gold flow? All that gold flowed to the countries that at the time were actually producing, were actually building, were actually creating, were actually engaged in productive activity. And early on, it went primarily to the Netherlands and to England. And that's why the Netherlands and England became rich, while Spain and Portugal became poor. Even though Spain and Portugal had better colonies in terms of extracting natural resources, the British focused more on trade and focused more on production. And ultimately, the Industrial Revolution made them richer than anybody because they produced wealth. Wealth is produced. It takes natural resources. It takes labor. And you, when you merge natural resources and labor with the most important component, the mind, reason, innovation, ingenuity, business, that's where you get wealth. So wealth is the material goods, and material goods need to be produced. Wealth needs to be created. Wealth needs to be produced. You can only produce wealth. You don't just find wealth. Wealth is not just out there to be picked. Now, a thief can steal wealth. You can steal your stuff. But that's zero sum. That is negative sum. That goes nowhere. That creates nothing. Wealth grows not by taking. Wealth grows by producing. So yes, those natural resources, I don't know, we have oil companies in Nigeria and constantly told that we're impoverishing Africa by taking their oil. But the oil is useless to them. It's only useful to those who extract it and can refine it. And refining and extracting and using and producing and creating and building wealth requires private property and freedom, and that's really what Nigeria needs. That's really what the rest of Africa needs in order to become wealthy. Isn't it funny that places like Hong Kong have no natural resources? Singapore has no natural resources, and yes, they are incredibly wealthy because they produce, they create wealth. So wealth comes fundamentally, and to some extent this is part of the theme of Atlas Shrugged, wealth comes from the application of reason to the problem of human existence, human flourishing, human success, human progress. Wealth comes from the application of reason, using reason to know and identify and understand the world around us, the components of the material world, and then reshape them in ways that are more useful for human beings. Wealth comes from the human mind, from a particular type of human mind, an entrepreneurial human mind, a human mind geared towards the reshaping of nature to fit man's needs. The reshaping of those resources that nature provides to fit man's needs. But for that, you need a mind. And for that, you need freedom and you need property rights. So the oil is not the resource. The ultimate resource is the human mind. And therefore, the ultimate source of wealth is the human mind. And if you want to create wealth anywhere in the world, what you need to create is an environment in which the human mind can flourish. The human mind can innovate. And then where individuals can act on their judgment, can act on their ideas, can try new things. Yeah, I highly recommend the writings of Julian Simon on the mind as the ultimate resource and why resources are infinite. I also recommend George Reisman's book, Capitalism. I'm just going to show you this book because it's hard to believe that this thing exists. Look at that. Look at the size of that. I mean, that's real size. I'm putting it next to my head. That is a massive book, right? Anyway, I recommend chapter 2 of that book about wealth. It's very good. It's very interesting. It goes through a number of different aspects of wealth. But Julian Simon's work, which I have behind me, I have it somewhere there, is excellent. Yeah, there it is. Much smaller book. The Ultimate Resource 2, also pretty thick, but much, much smaller, just to give you a sense of the difference, right? Look at that. And Ultimate Resource is already a big book. All right. These are great books to understand where wealth comes from, where natural resources come from, what makes a resource rather than a liability, and the role of the human mind in all of that. Now, on top of that, one of the things that is true about wealth is that there is an unlimited capacity to produce it. There's no limit to how much wealth can be created. Because there's no limit to how much we can reorganize the atoms in the universe. But fundamental to that is there's no limit to our desire for wealth. Ooh, you're being greedy. Yeah, absolutely. There's no limit to our desire for wealth. More is better. Because more is not just quantity, it's quality. I mean, at some point, you know, let's take, if you take locomotion, for example, at some point you say, I want to get from point A to point B, so I'll ride a donkey, and then maybe a horse is faster. Right? Can't ride a bicycle because there are no paved roads. But once I have a horse, and somebody invents a car, I want the car. And once I've driven a car, I want an airplane. And once you have an airplane, well, I want a spaceship. I want to be able to get from one side of the planet to the other in an hour. Take off, land, I'm there. Now, I want all these things because the capacity of my life to, you know, to get to places faster, to get to more places, to experience more things, to do more stuff, to accumulate things that bring me pleasure and bring me joy is infinite. There's no limit to that. And of course, maybe there's a limit for the individual, his lifespan, but then there are more people all the time. Wealth builds, and our needs expand. Once you discover you need a cell phone, then as soon as the iPhone comes out, well, you suddenly need an iPhone. And I'm not saying need here in some derogatory way. I mean, you really need one. How could you survive today without an iPhone? It's a need. So our need, our wants, our desires, our rational desires, our desires to better ourselves and better our surroundings, and there's always something that is growing. When you settle and say, okay, I've got enough wealth, well, you're ready to retire and you're ready to leave this earth. Right? Here, Tom Brady's retiring. All right. He's not quite ready to leave. I'm sure he'll do something else productive, because human beings need, and to act in order to attain those needs. And those needs might be different. They might be spiritual. They might not be material. But even to attain spiritual needs, one needs material stuff. You want to hear music? Well, you need a stereo system. You need an iPhone. You need some headphones. You know, think about. You know, do you remember the days of headphones with cables? And think about how many. You know, I'm interested in listening to music, so I get a lot of these. I guess a lot of ads and stuff, and news articles and reviews on. But think about how many headphones types there are out there. And how many different types, how many different Bluetooth headphones that accommodate every different style and look and sound quality and variations in sound tonality and whatever. And then the little ones that you can stick in your ear, and they're wireless. And now they're talking about the ability to project sound wirelessly directly into your ear without a headphone at all. And you might say, I don't need that. Well, once you discover you can listen to that music without carrying around all that equipment on your ears, maybe you will need it. It's a constant progression of more, and more being a proxy for better too. More and better. Sound quality is better. The ease of use is better. The form factor is better. The comfort is better. And there's no end to it. There's simply no end to it. Right? And that's true in every field of human endeavor where there is progress. There's no end to the improvements that can be made. And there's no end to the improvements that will be made if we allow it, if they allow those to be made. So, wealth is not static. There's never enough of it. Once we reach a point where there's enough of it, we're dead as a species. But there isn't. Individuals are always going to want more. They're always going to want better, because they're always going to want to improve their lives. And it's an essential part of human life to want more, to desire more, to seek out more, to figure out ways to achieve more, to gain more, to produce more. An essential activity in economics, in our economic lives, is the various ways in which we can create wealth. Think about consumption. And this is why the focus of consumption of modern economics is sick, right? Consumption is the destruction of wealth. Now, it's the destruction of wealth for a positive purpose, right? I destroyed the ice cream because I wanted to eat it because it tastes good. I destroyed the car by driving it 200,000 miles. But the point of consumption is use. Production is what makes those things that we use possible. And it's not just, again, static. It's making better and better and more advanced and more advanced and more, pro-human, more better for us stuff that we can consume. So production has to be the primary economic activity. Consumption, in many respects, is an afterthought. Production is what drives everything. And really, what economics is there to study, you could argue that economics is a science of wealth. It's a science of the creation of wealth. In other words, it's a science of production and trade, because it's through production and trade that wealth is created. You take stuff that is not very useful, combine it in ways that make it useful, that's production. That's brand new wealth. A new material good has come into existence that benefits human beings that didn't exist before. And even our spiritual goods have a material source, all of them. Like music needs a musician. It needs instruments. It needs a mechanism to deliver to us. It needs a concert hall. And ultimately, those sound waves reach our ears. The same is true of a painting. It's a physical form. There have to be paints. There have to be canvases. So it's really, it is so, I don't know, what's the right word? It's so obnoxious and it's so just ignorant. This idea that, it's all natural resources. All the wealth was stolen because it was under the ground in Africa, and therefore, by taking it, we took their wealth. No, the resources were there, but they were not wealth. It's the innovation created in the West, back then, and today it's created all over the world, that turned the resources into wealth. Wealth creation are the ideas. Wealth creation are the entrepreneurs. Wealth creation is the innovation, the ingenuity. That's what creates wealth. That's what matters. Not guns, germs, and steel. But freeing up the human mind, that's the key to everything. And when you establish freedom, when you let people think for themselves, when you let them act on their ideas, that's when you get wealth. And then it should be protected, and that's what property rights are for. Once, property rights are there to protect and defend, to protect the creators and the creation of wealth. Property is not primary. It's a mistake libertarians make all the time. Property is not the primary. The primary is reason. The primary is the ability to think, and the primary, in terms of individual rights, is your right to your own life. It's the mind that must be protected. And it's your ability to act on the conclusions of your mind that must be protected. And it's the product that is the result of your acting on the conclusions of your mind that must be protected, and that's property rights. Protecting the product of your action based on your mind. That's what property rights, that's the essence of property rights. All right, let's take some questions on wealth, related to wealth, related to these issues around wealth. And then I want to do a movie review of the county. I keep saying the country, but it's the county. And then we'll take some of these others. Okay, would it be irrational for a person born on Mars to not want to move to Earth to experience more production and wealth. It doesn't necessarily. I mean, somebody born on Mars could enjoy, I mean, depends on the political system in Mars. Maybe Mars is freer than Earth is. And maybe what he wants is the challenge, the excitement of producing on Mars and shaping a new civilization, and shaping a new world. You know, if you live under freedom and you're still poor, right, then you don't move to where the wealth is. You create and import the wealth. You trade for that wealth, and you become wealthy. I mean, the colonies, the American colonies were poor. They became wealthy by producing and trading. And so the standard of whether you want to stay on Mars or come to Earth would depend on the conditions on Mars, the level of freedom on Mars, and your own personal values. I mean, I can imagine somebody saying, this is barren land, I want to turn it into something beautiful. That's exciting. That would be fun. William, thank you for the contribution. Really appreciate that. Tazy, thank you for the support. Really appreciate it. We're at about, I don't know, let's say 370. So we're about 230 short still of the $600 goal. So now's the time to start asking questions. Dave, I've got your question, but I'm going to wait on it. You keep coming back to Saving Private Ryan, and I know I still owe you a movie review, but you keep coming back to Saving Private. Yes, I will answer that question later. Let's look for stuff related to wealth and productivity and stuff like that. All right. No questions from all material goods considered wealth. Yes, I mean all material goods that benefit man. I mean you could say that some stuff doesn't really benefit people. It's pseudo wealth. I don't know. You know, the whips for a sadomasochist. The pet rocks. But those are marginal issues, right? People can be irrational, and they can attribute certain things benefit where no benefit really exists there, right? And in that sense, it's not real wealth. This is part of my challenge with crypto, right? It's what is the value? What is the material benefit to mankind that this creates? And you know, I think that's the struggle with crypto. It has to. I mean, cigarettes create pleasure, so clearly they were a form of wealth, a minor form of wealth. And then when people figured out that they were actually harmful, they did away with them. It doesn't. Wealth does not necessitate that everybody is rational, that every good is, I mean, there's a lot of, quote, wealth tied up in, let's say, a horrible art. It's still marginal in the context of wealth totally. I mean, where is most of the wealth held? What is the source of most wealth? I mean, what's the source? What's the locale of most wealth? It's in productive capacity. It's in factories, it's in warehouses, it's stuff that makes stuff is real wealth. And its value reflects its capacity to milk wealth well into the future. So production is a source of wealth, and therefore production is the home of wealth. For example, stocks. Owning stocks is not wealth in and of itself. It's a claim against wealth. It's a claim against the productive assets, the productive ability of the company in which you're invested. Right? It's not wealth in and of itself. It's a legal claim. Same with bonds. They're a legal claim against the productive capabilities, capacities of these entities. And when you say, I don't know, what is Elon Musk's wealth? Elon Musk's wealth is the factories that make Teslas. That's his wealth. And all the stock is, it represents a claim against those factories. And we value those stocks based on what? Well, based on those factories' capacity to create Teslas, wealth, well into the future. Not just their capacity right now, not just their ability to create that wealth, to create those products right now, but to create that wealth well into the future. And we discount that back. And that is the real wealth that Tesla represents. Now, you know, and of course, the intellectual property is valuable in that it makes the profit margin on those assets. It makes it possible to create those and to ascertain profit from it. So wealth is this, you know, we often think about billionaires as, you know, they have big vaults where they keep all their cash. No, what they have is stocks and bonds. And what those stocks and bonds really represent, stocks primarily, what those stocks really represent is the physical capacity, the physical, mental labor. I mean, that's part of the wealth, is the labor and the ability to pay them. That all of that can create, all the stuff that can be created. Dan Allen says, any thoughts on George Gilder's definition of wealth as wealth is knowledge? I think he's reversing it. You know, knowledge is the source of wealth. Knowledge is the source of wealth. Reason is the source of wealth. Reason as applied in a particular way. Knowledge is applied in a particular way to a particular problem. It's the source of wealth, but it isn't wealth. Right? You might know a lot, but be poor, not have any wealth. So wealth is a product of knowledge. It is not knowledge. Wealth is the stuff that through knowledge and action and division of labor and paying your employees and organizing production, all of that requires knowledge. Knowledge of business, knowledge of finance, knowledge of engineering, now all of that requires knowledge. But at the end of the day, all of that knowledge needs to be applied to create wealth, which is the stuff that generates, that produces. Right? Wealth doesn't encompass consumption, because consumption, once you consume it, the wealth is gone. It encompasses capital goods, of course, but it does not encompass consumption. It encompasses your capacity to consume, but not consumption in and of itself, because the consumption in and of itself is a form of wealth deterioration. Your wealth is going away. The car that you bought, it represents a certain amount of wealth today, but after you drive 100,000 miles, it represents a lot less wealth. It's worth less. Cigarettes are wealth until they're consumed. Once they're consumed, they're not wealth anymore. Right? So they encompass consumption goods. They don't encompass the act of consumption. How much stock do you put in the oft-expressed idea that business, especially free trade, is the key to world peace? I certainly think that business and free trade are important contributors to peace, because business and free trade encourage, facilitate, and reward individualism. And by rewarding individualism, they make it less likely that countries go to war. When people have more stuff, and therefore can lose more stuff, they're hesitant to go to war. when people have more to lose, or when life becomes more valuable because you have long life and your life is good and people are happy and people are, which I think trade and business facilitate, it's much more difficult to go to war. So I absolutely think that free trade and business is one of the keys to world peace. I mean, ultimately, world peace is a product of individualism. It's a product of freedom. But free trade and business are an expression of that and make that more likely, all of that more likely. Right? All right, Adam says, 900 to 1300 Song China got to wealth levels that Europe did not reach until about 1800. That's true. But did not spend enough on defense and was conquered. And then China got poorer than Dark Ages Europe. Is defense a form of production? Yes, I think it is, up to a certain point. You know, defense necessary for self-defense is crucial for production. I'm not sure I accept your interpretation of what's happened in China, but that's a longer discussion. I think China's main problem is not lack of defense. China's main problem, and why it constantly up and down and up and down and never really had this constant upward trajectory, is because of a lack of a proper epistemology, a lack of respect for reason, a lack of understanding of the role of reason, a lack of a concept of reason, I think, in Chinese. And therefore, there would be spurts of innovation, but then it would go away because there was a lack of understanding of what held it together. So there was no concept of political freedom, no concept of the mind and the mind needing freedom, which that concept, those ideas were made evident in Europe during the Enlightenment, and that's why it's post-Enlightenment that Europe took off from the perspective of wealth creation. All right, let's see quickly. What about value in expensive antique books versus a cheaper new edition of same book on Amazon? I found an intellectual collection of Collector's Atlas Shrugged book today. I want the antique one, LOL. Well, because it serves some need, some desire that you have. It serves some purpose for you, right? So it's a value to you. And in that sense, it constitutes part of your wealth, particularly if other people desire it as well and therefore willing to pay you what you think it's worth. But, you know, and when you're poor, when you don't have a lot of money, you settle for the cheaper edition. And you're happy with the cheaper edition. You're thrilled by the cheaper edition. This is from Catherine. And, you know, when you're wealthier, you can afford now, your scope of desires expands, as I was saying earlier. And now you can afford, you know, the exotic, some rare book that costs a lot of money. It says, I'm reading The Tyranny of Need, excellent book of morale. Yes, we'll have Peter Schwartz, the author of that book, on the show in the next few weeks to talk about it. Let's see, wealth. Is wealth contingent on a functioning economy? Is that why the Fed is able to destroy wealth by disrupting the economy? Yes, but the Fed is able to destroy wealth in lots of different ways, through lots of different mechanisms disrupting the economy. So the creation of wealth depends on freedom. It depends on people's ability to trade freely, to innovate freely, to produce freely, to take their ideas and implement them in reality freely. And when you start putting barriers to those freedom, wealth creation is hampered. And so absolutely, the Fed manipulates interest rates. That sends false signals to the marketplace, to producers who then don't know what to produce, and they might produce something that people don't actually want or at a price that they can't afford. And it just distorts the whole mechanisms of production. And when the Fed bails out, dying companies who now can continue to produce and therefore continue to compete with companies that weren't dying and were moving things forward, but now they have to compete with these dying companies that are held afloat artificially, They then fold, and you get the best, the most innovative companies going out of existence. So there is a lot of ways in which disrupting the economy destroys wealth, destroys ability to produce wealth. And ultimately, if you're not producing wealth, we're going through consumption to destroy wealth. We're going backwards. All right. How do we evaluate the wealth of someone like Peter Keating? Because in a sense, since he is second-handed, he's not really pursuing his own values. Well, yes, he's not pursuing his own values, but it's still true that he might be, because he's mimicking people who are pursuing their own values, because he is sitting on the shoulders or leeching off of the spirit of real producers, Howard Roark, ancient Greek architects. He is producing something, but he's producing something. Some wealth is coming into the world, but it's a product of other people, not a product of Peter Keating. He's just imitating what they're doing, and that's finite because he can't innovate. He can only copy. So he can't really produce and create something new. He can just mimic what's already in existence. All right, questions are rolling in. Topics are rolling in. And, all right, we'll have to. So only $20 or more questions now. And, please, because otherwise I'll never get out of here. All right, general support. Thank you, Alan. I was stuck in North Venezuela for 4 weeks, so I couldn't contribute for a while. Sorry about that. No problem. Sorry you were stuck in North Venezuela. I hope you're somewhere safe now. North Venezuela does not sound safe. Okay, let's keep that. There's Frank. All right, all these questions I'm going to keep for now because I want to do this movie review, and then all right, just this one. Brownie says, do you think, do you agree with this statement? The goal of successful business is to be able to sell high quality products at a low price, aim to increase quality to price ratio. No, not necessarily. Sometimes, Marvin, thank you. That is very, very generous. Sometimes the goal of business is to produce medium quality stuff for even lower. So it's the goal of business is to produce profits, and profits can be produced in a variety of different means. They can be produced by charging more for high quality stuff. They can be produced for charging less, like Walmart, for medium or low quality stuff, but relatively high quality than the alternatives. So I think the fundamental that what successful businesses are focused on is making profits, and a variety of different. You could increase quality, you could change price, but the most important factor here is productivity. The productivity of your technology, the productivity of your labor at the end of the day. And productivity is determined by technology. It's determined by the motivation of your employees. It's determined by the facilities you build. It's determined by the quality of your management. It's determined by the quality of your supply chain. So ultimately, it's about profit. Profit in the economic sense, not in the anyway. Profit in the economic sense. All right, let's quickly do this movie review. So, The County is a Icelandic movie. It was made recently. I think it's 2019. One second, let me just bring this up. I closed the window by mistake. Okay, so The County was made in 2019. I was right. It was made in Iceland. It was made by a director called Grimur Håkon Aasen. I'm sure I mispronounced that, and I'm not going to try to pronounce the names of the actors. It is filmed it's very slow. It's very deliberate. There's not a huge amount of dialogue in it. The scenery emphasizes the coldness, starkness, alien sense in which living in Iceland must feel like. There are no trees. There's nothing green in the movie. It's everything is harsh, and the movie is very much gives you a sense of the harshness of life. There are no happy people in the county. It is a movie that has kind of a pro-freedom, if you will, kind of political theme. Although I think that political theme is undermined by the I don't know, just the profound kind of misery that the movie projects. Again, nobody's happy, nobody's really successful, except the bad guys. And well, so this is a small community, farming community in Iceland. Milk is a big product. There's a certain element of anti-technology in the movie. They rile against the new machines to milk the cows. But the focus of the movie is really the co-op. This co-op exists in town, and anything you want to buy, the co-op sells. Anything you want to sell, you sell through the co-op. It turns out the co-op is charging exorbitant prices, buying from you at low prices. The co-op is making a fortune. The farmers are barely surviving, struggling. Life is hard, it's cold, it's miserable, and they can't make any money. On the other hand, the co-op, they drive nice cars. The people who work for the co-op drive nice cars. They dress nicely. They have nice houses. They're doing great. Anybody who buys from any other source other than the co-op, there are plenty of other people selling stuff that is much cheaper than the co-op, gets boycotted. And now, in a small community, boycott is very hard. So the movie is really critical of the whole co-op mechanism. It basically is a story about a woman who discovers that her husband was working for the co-op to suppress competition. And that when he dies, she then fights the co-op, stands up to the co-op. And it's not about a movie about her winning, because it's not clear that she wins, although she does rally the other farmers to fight the co-op, but it doesn't really, this is a Scandinavian movie, so it's pretty dark. It doesn't really project their victory. It projects her personal victory in the sense that she leaves the community at the end of the movie, and she's got a bit of a smile on her face. She's going to the city. She's going to a new life. She's given up on all of this. So the movie is pretty powerful. It's interesting. It is beautifully made, but it's in spite of the fact that she wins, and in spite of the fact that she stands up to the bad guys, and in spite of the fact that she is amazingly courageous. The way the movie is made, it's very naturalistic in style. The fact that everybody's miserable, it doesn't make this movie particularly enjoyable, but it is a recommended movie. It is worthwhile in a sense that there is a real conflict here, and a real interesting conflict, and it is anti-co-op. So next time you debate a communist who tells you, or one of these socialists who tells you, communes are co-ops, they're fantastic. Well, this is very anti the co-ops, and shows the co-ops' corruption, and shows what monopolies, when they have the ability to use force against you, to coerce you into participating in that monopoly, how horrible, how terrible, and how destructive they can be. So the fact that this comes out of Iceland, that it's one of those Scandinavian countries, considered Scandinavian countries, that are considered these ideals. I've never figured that out, why it's ideal. Whenever you read or watch a Scandinavian movie, everybody in it is typically miserable. So how can they be the happiest places on planet Earth if their art projects them as miserable? I don't believe it. I believe the art. Like, go watch Ingmar Bergman's movies. He was a Swedish director, right? Ingmar Bergman's movies. I mean, people are miserable. They're hateful. They're angry. They're confused. They're raped by Freudian psychological damage. They were made in Sweden. They're loved by Swedes. This says something about the sense of life of Swedes. It's not a happy place. And yet, they rank really high on happiness studies. Something is wrong. If you read the best thrillers, I think, right now are being produced in Scandinavia. Why? Because Scandinavian writers are super dark. And they're very good at creating these scenarios of horrible ways in which to kill people. And then detectives who are miserable and pathetic and have destroyed lives going and solving the problem, solving the mystery. But it's all about people who are miserable. There are no happy characters in the books. With the exception of, and this is why I like the books in particular, is Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which I liked a lot, the trilogy of the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, because she and the newspaper man were positive characters, but that's rare. Usually they're just miserable. Yeah. All right. Yeah, Russians are pretty grim. That's why they drink a lot. All right. So that is my movie review of The County. It's a good movie, too naturalistic and too dark. Too dark and a little slow. I think a lot of you will find it slow, but very good in its political theme, in a sense that it's anti-co-op, and that's a good thing. Okay, let's start with the $50 questions. We've got a couple of those. Dave says, in Saving Private Ryan, when Miller ordered his men to take out the machine gun nest instead of going around it, was that altruistic? He argued leaving it would get the next bridge to get ambushed. But that seemed like sacrificing his men for others. Yeah, but that's what you do in war, right? In war, you're fighting for victory. War is not about self-preservation. Otherwise, you don't go to war. War is about victory. And if you're fighting for freedom, if you're fighting for something you believe in, if you're fighting so that you don't and your family doesn't have to live in a place that is not free under the boots of a Hitler or a communist or some authoritarian, then you're willing to risk your life, you're willing to fight, you're willing to do what is necessary in order to prevent that outcome from happening. And that includes risking your life by charging at the machine gun, because the only way to win is by taking out this machine gun. And that's your job. This is why armies should never be coerced. There should never be a draft. If you're a volunteer in an army, then you say to you, I have volunteered to do what is necessary to win. I've decided that's in my rational self-interest, to win. And if charging this machine gun is what is necessary to win, then that is what I do. So your standard becomes victory. And so it's absolutely not altruism given what is going on there. Yes, people die in war. That's the essence of war. Now, given that the soldiers in World War II are not volunteers and so on, that complicates all these things, and it makes it more difficult. It's why we must fight for a volunteer-only army. On the other hand, the fact that the Germans were evil and were intent on taking over the world, and the fact that the Americans were the good guys trying to save civilization. Yeah, so you're fighting for something noble and something good, something proper. You're risking your life for something noble and something good. All right. Frank says, is the value of Bitcoin that it is private access to money like a Swiss bank account via digital means like a Swiss bank account? Well, that depends. That depends on whether Bitcoin becomes money. Bitcoin is not money yet. It might be money one day. And the question is, what do you think the probability of it actually being money is going to be? That is partially what determines the value of Bitcoin. That and whether you can build on the Bitcoin network other functions that are wealth producing, that are valuable, that increase production, that make production more efficient. But it's not access to money, because the whole claim of Bitcoin is it is money. Now, because and it doesn't really give you private access to money, like because if you have to convert it into dollars, when you convert it into dollars, it's not anonymous, and it's not private anymore. When you convert it into gold, it's not anonymous, it's not private anymore. It's only private as long as it remains Bitcoin, and even there, it's questionable. And then the question is Bitcoin money? Not yet. Maybe it will be. Right? Maybe it will be one day. But for that, it has to be adopted widely. Money is the common means of exchange, common medium of exchange. Bitcoin is not yet a common medium of exchange. Again, might be one day. I'm not saying it will never be. I doubt it. But yeah, you can buy some Tesla with Dogecoin, but that doesn't make Dogecoin money. Because, yeah, you can buy Tesla, but it's not a common medium of exchange. It's I can buy stuff with my airline miles. I can get, if you go to American Airlines website, you can buy headphones with miles. You can buy, vacations with miles. Does that make my American Airlines points money? No. It makes them have value. It makes them. You can exchange them for some stuff of value, but it doesn't make them money. Money has to be common. All right, let's see. Where are the $20 questions? Let's go from the top. Michael, off topic, but I've been thinking about this from your interview with Harry Binswanger. Is the objectivist view that we have no idea what consciousness is, but we know 100% that it isn't physical? Well, that it actually isn't physical, I think we know, I don't know if 100%, but we know with a high probability, but we don't know exactly what it is. It seems like an attribute it's an attribute of something physical, of the mind. It's a product of something physical of the mind. But based on everything we know about the physical, it's not physical. Now, we might discover, I think Leonard Peikoff in OPA says, we might discover one day that there is some material that is consciousness. But that's somewhat random, right? Michael asks, which is more explicit about crushing the human soul, Christianity or socialism? Well, Christianity. Christianity is much more concerned about the human soul and is much more interested with the human soul and bringing it down. At least conventional Christianity, all forms of Christianity. A million different forms and interpretations of Christianity. But both, look, there's a lot of similarities between socialism and Christianity. And, it's not one, and they're both pretty brutal. But look, Christianity dominated for a couple of thousand years, and it had pretty brutal consequences to the human soul and the human material well-being. Socialism has been defeated over and over again, partially because I don't think it cares enough about the soul. It doesn't spend enough time on the soul. Michael asks, St. Michael, why do inferiority complexes manifest in desire to control or tear down others? Because what does inferiority complex manifest? What are you inferior to? You're inferior to others. Inferiority complexes are complexes that are attached to kind of a second-handed mentality, to a mentality that's comparing yourself to other people constantly. And if you really have an inferiority complex, then you don't really deep down believe that you can rise and improve yourself. So the only way you can resolve it, the only way you can express its resolution is by trying to tear others down to your level. Ashton, are all material goods considered wealth? I think we answered that. All material goods that are for human beings, that is, that have some way in which they benefit human beings, are wealth. If it doesn't benefit human beings, if nobody wants it, If nobody needs it, if nobody wants it, then it's not wealth. So by man, for man. Ashton also asks, have you ever tried to get on Joe Rogan podcast? Many times, many times. He doesn't want me on, or so far has not wanted me on. But you guys should try. You should tell him you listen to his show and you'd really think I would be a great addition. Does Yoram Hazony represent the rest of the right in terms of how much more rational he is to the left? What does this imply for future debates with the right? I think Yoram Hazony is the best that the new right has to offer, right? Because he's more intellectual, he's more open to debate, he's politer. I think other people on the right, like, I forgot his name. But anyway, you know, are not as thoughtful, are not interested in debate. They're interested in sounding off. You know, I think this is part of the fact that Yoram Hazony is Jewish, and you know, Judaism. He's immersed in a tradition of disputation, immersed in a tradition of debate, of discussion, of proving your opponent wrong, proving yourself right, not just yelling him down, on not just scoring emotional points. So he is the best in that sense of the right. But I also think he is not representative of the right in a sense that I don't think his attitude will win out. If you look at the national conservative movement, his attitude and his mannerism is in the minority. I think Sohab Amari, that's the name I was looking for before, is going to be much more dominant on the right, partially because he's Catholic. Catholicism is much more about dogma, imposing dogma, you know, cramming dogma down your throat. It's less about disputation. It's less about discussion and debate and using reason, you know, unless maybe you're from the scholastic school, and I don't think Sohab Amari is. I mean, he is a nasty character who likes to go after people. Yoram, I don't get a sense that he likes to go after people, right? So this is that I'd say is the difference. If the new right was primarily Yoram Hazony, I think I don't think they would flourish. I don't think they would be successful. I think what makes them dangerous, what makes them potentially successful, is the kind of because I think Yoram Hazony is wrong, and I think if you present his ideas in a rational way, people can see it's wrong. What incites people, what motivates people, what gets people excited, is the kind of more dogmatic, emotionalist approach that the Catholics have, the common good, the waving of the flag, the out and out emotionalistic collectivism that they have. That's what makes them much more dangerous. Ashton says, off topic, but Tom Brady just retired. Yeah, I think it's time. He's 43 years old. Next season, he'd be 44. He's obviously the greatest quarterback ever, at least by the numbers. And what's he got left to prove? I mean, he went to Tampa Bay and turned a poor club into a good club. Not a Super Bowl winner, but a really good club just by his presence there. Quarterbacks matter. And right now we're living in an era of some great young quarterbacks. It's pretty spectacular. If you saw that game between Kansas City and Buffalo, pretty amazing quarterback play. Amazing. Chaos asks, do you think the repealing of almost all COVID restrictions in the UK will lead to a big increase in UK productivity, which will show how badly COVID regulations have disrupted economic growth? Yes, I think the UK is going to be way ahead of many other countries that are not lifting the restrictions. I think productivity will increase. I mean, it won't increase completely normally because people are still going to behave differently. People are still going to be out sick. People are still going to be homesick. But relative to everywhere else, where there are lockdowns and everything else, this is going to be huge and hugely beneficial. So yes, it's a huge plus for the UK economy. All right, let's go to the lower level. We were at 661. If you want to, somebody wants to put in $100 to get us to 750, that would be cool. But otherwise, I'm quite happy with 661. We made our goal, and I can't take many questions. So if you're going to ask questions, make them big buck questions, big dollar amounts. All right, Scott says, I'm happy to hear your optimism about 50 years from now, even if the next 50 years are rough. Can you expand on how you envision better ideas taking hold? I will, but not right now. I mean, my intention is to, I'm going to give a talk on at OCON this year in Washington, D.C. in the summer. And the talk is going to be titled, Why, I don't know what it's going to be titled, but the theme of the talk is going to be Why I'm Still Optimistic. Why, in spite of all the bad, in spite of all the problems, in spite of the horror, in spite of all the evil, I'm still optimistic. And there I will talk about that. But in preparation for that, I will, over the episodes of the Yaron Brook Show from now until then, I will be talking about different aspects of that. That's a big topic, Scott, for a $5 question. Sorry. And it's a topic that somebody's going to pay me a lot of money to give a talk on. So I'm not going to give it all to you now. It'll take me an hour. But it is Ask Me Anything. I'll answer. The answer won't always satisfy you in terms of its scope and its depth. OCON 2022 does not have a theme and probably will not have a theme. But it will be available, but it will be up there soon. Right, July, and hope you guys come. I hope to meet as many of you as possible at OCON. It's in Washington, D.C., which is not my favorite place on planet Earth, but there you are. If you've never been, there's a lot of great museums, to go to. And we're going to have a lot of great speakers, and it's going to be a fabulous week. And again, I hope all of you come, and I'd like to meet you guys. Let's see. Michael asked, why did you like the movie Django Chained? It was nihilistic and brutal. Oh, God, I can't remember. It was certainly brutal. That's the nature of modern movies. I liked it because I think it had this clear anti-slavery theme to it. It was had good action scenes. I mean, I didn't love it. I don't like any of Tarantino's movies. Particularly because of the brutality. But the brutality, like all his movies, have a cartoonish element to it, which makes it mildly more tolerable. But I'm not a huge fan. It's just of all these movies, that's one that I thought at least had a decent theme to it. In a sense that it was anti-slavery. But I don't remember it well enough, which tells you how much of an impact it had on me. Not much. Andrew asked, what is the historical cause of Russia's exaggerated pride? I don't think Russia has exaggerated pride. I think Russia has irrational arrogance. And I think it comes from an inferiority complex. Russia has always played second fiddle to the West, has always envied the West, has always tried to emulate the West, and always failed. Inglourious Basterds was a horrible movie, which didn't really have a theme except revenge. And revenge in the most gross, uninteresting, just violent, brutal way. So I thought Django Unchained was much better than Inglourious Basterds. Russia has never been as rich as the West, never produced as much as the West, never had artists as good as the West, except its novelist in the second half of the 19th century. And has always been jealous, and that jealousy came across with Catherine the Great and Peter, what was Peter something, who tried to built St. Petersburg as a Western city. But they never could emulate that. They never could actually achieve it. They never got there. They've always been underperformed. They've always underachieved relative to the West. And Peter the Great, yes. I mean, think about Peter the Great building St. Petersburg, a beautiful city, but how many tens of thousands of people died in order to build? I mean, it was like the pyramids, like building the pyramids. Yeah, sorry, they had great musicians, right? Music and literature. are the two great things that Russia produced. But that's it. They were never successful militarily. They were never successful, wealth-wise, production-wise. And in the Soviet Union, they had these ambitions of taking over the world, and they failed, and they crumbled. And now Putin is is the leader of a poor country. Look how much richer China is than Russia, how much more successful China has been than Russia. Russia's a poor country. Again, other than its music and its great novelists, great chess players, produced nothing. Great mathematicians, I guess. So Russia has an inferiority complex. And that's where it has this irrational arrogance. And it's a very, very collectivistic culture. So they have an inferiority complex as a kind of a collectivistic thing. Right? Individuals, there are Russian individuals who don't have an inferiority complex, because an individual doesn't necessarily buy into the problems of the culture. But the culture is definitely one that feels inferior to the West and has to overcompensate by being stupidly arrogant. Like maybe going to war with the West when they're going to get, when they can't win that war. Michael says, everyone in San Francisco looks miserable and malnourished from veganism and nihilism. Oh, Michael, that is an absurd exaggeration. There are lots of Twitter, Facebook, tech, biotech companies in San Francisco where the employees look great. There are some people in San Francisco that look that way. Roland says, just for the record, I'm not part of any free X movement other than Free the World. I didn't think you were, Roland, but thank you for the clarification. The Legend 27 says, what do you think about the idea of SFR Yugoslavia was somehow this bastion of socialist success and claims as market socialism? Yeah, right. I mean, Yugoslavia was a poor country. It produced really, really bad automobiles. It was poverty-stricken. It was a horrible place. No. The historical record just doesn't support any of that. The West blew it out of the water in terms of wealth. Out of the water. It wasn't even close. Okay, Michael asks, Hazony is way too smart to believe the statist religious BS he's spewing. He has a totalitarian agenda. Don't let his gentle demeanor fool you. Yeah, but look, there are lots of smart people that grow up in a culture that it doesn't allow them to think differently. You know, to some extent, Hazony, even if he tries, can't even conceive of a different worldview. He can't comprehend objectivism. His mind cannot go there. Since he was a tiny baby, this kind of collectivistic Jewish religious attitude has been instilled in him. And it's a rare person that can escape that. It truly is a rare person who can escape that. So I wouldn't be too harsh on him. Frank says, you mentioned that Russians can be dark and grim. But why do you think they are great chess players, Kasparsky? Because they use whatever IQ they have, whatever genius they have, in a way that does not force them to confront reality. I mean, chess is a game that allows you to basically divorce yourself from the reality in which you live. It's not like business. It's not like engineering, which is connected to the world. You have to shape the environment out there. When you're dark and grim, when in a culture that looks down on success and looks down on progress, and when you're not that motivated for success and progress, and you're really, really, really smart, you can apply that to a game, and you can excel at a game. It has no consequences, doesn't make the world a better place, doesn't advance much. It's enjoyable for you and maybe for some people who watch it, but it doesn't. I mean, Ayn Rand has this letter to Kasparov where she talks about this. But it's an escape. It's an escape in a dark, oppressive, somewhat mystical, authoritarian culture. The geniuses escape to chess. At least that's what they do in Russia. All right, Adam Campbell, I think there's a place for Quentin's movies the same way there's room for dessert. Not good for you, but as long as you know that, it's good in small doses. He's talented and certainly unafraid of being an individual. Yeah, but an individual for what purpose? I mean, the hippies were individuals in that sense, but it's individualism for the sake of being different rather than for the sake of achieving something. It's not, I don't view it as dessert because I don't enjoy it. It's a waste of my time. So I get that some people do. I'm not damning you, but I don't. I don't see it as dessert. Dessert should be pleasurable. Yes, maybe instant gratification. I view the Marx Brothers as dessert. There's nothing profound about the Marx Brothers, but they're dessert. They're fun. They're enjoyable. You just get a blast out of them. And I find Quentin makes me uncomfortable. I find the violence gratuitous. There's nothing enjoyable about that kind of violence. I don't like violence. I think violence is horrible. I think even when Steven Spielberg does violence, I just don't like it. It's wrenching. It's unenjoyable. It doesn't really provide a point unless you're just going for the anti-war agenda. But that's not what Quentin's doing. What's the point? What's the point of any of these movies, even as dessert? There are a lot of movies that I qualify as dessert that are just fun. Like there's a lot of oh God, Katharine Hepburn movies that are just fun. Like His Girl Friday. There's no deep theme to it. To the extent that there's a theme, it might not even be that good. But it's just so enjoyable to watch them go at each other and talk really, really fast, and it's funny, and it's enjoyable. And for me, Quentin Tarantino is not enjoyable. Like OMG, Puppy says, check out Oliver Stone's documentary, Ukraine on Fire. They are trapped between the manipulations of Russia and the West. I don't trust anything Oliver Stone produces, and neither should you. So Oliver Stone is anti-West. Oliver Stone hates America. Oliver Stone will present the West as the worst. So I don't know that anything that Oliver Stone produces is true. Quite the contrary. I have every reason to believe that what Oliver Stone is producing is some leftist, he's a real Marxist, some leftist propaganda. And here the propaganda is to be anti-West. You can also be anti-Russia, because ultimately Russia's not communist anymore. But you've also got to be anti-West. And I don't, again, I've been to Ukraine. I've talked to Ukrainians. I've lectured there. I've spoken there. I've attended a performance of Night of January 16th, Ayn Rand's play in Ukraine. I've spent time in Kiev. Not a huge amount of time, but I've spent some time in Kiev. My impression is not that they're being manipulated by the West. They want to be Western. They want the West. They don't want Russia. Or at least a majority of them. Not all of them. A small majority of them. They want to be affiliated with the good of the West. Oliver Stone is a propagandist and cannot be trusted. He cannot produce a documentary. His movies are well made. But think about his movies and the propaganda he's trying to inflict in his movies. All right, guys, thanks. Well, 2 hours. I will see you tomorrow, same time, same place, I think, 3 o'clock. 2 o'clock Eastern time. We'll probably talk about who Biden's going to nominate for the Supreme Court. We'll probably talk about some other stuff from the news. Maybe we'll talk about Jordan Peterson. And what the hell was he talking about with Joe Rogan? Because it's a head scratcher. Bye, everybody.